Good morning, everyone. It's estimated that 1 in 5 adults who have had COVID-19 suffer from long COVID, months, even years after being infected. Now, researchers in New Jersey are testing a treatment that could help those suffering with the often debilitating symptoms. Elise Preston has more.
We'll have to do that.
Nurse Debbie Turner has spent 3 decades caring for patients, but when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the frontline worker was the patient.
There are a couple days that I don't remember at all.
Now, more than 2 years after her infection, she's still battling symptoms of long COVID.
I still have problems with my memory, like brain fog. I still get short of breath.
There's still so much unknown about this virus.
As scientists work to better understand long COVID, treatment usually focuses on relieving symptoms. Now, a new study at Hackensack University Medical Center is testing whether omega-3 supplements can help.
Because we know COVID is an inflammatory process, could fish oil supplements minimize the inflammation, which in turn is possibly causing these long-term symptoms?
Dr. Manisha Parulikar is leading the study. The omega-3 supplement is a specific formulation that's different from products purchased over the counter. Nurse Turner is one of 30 participants in the study's first round.
I don't know if I really felt a difference, but I felt hopeful that no matter what happens, if I'm on the placebo or I'm taking this, that all of this is aimed at being able to find something that may work.
Proud to be a part of research that could help long COVID patients get their lives back. Elise Preston, CBS News, Hackensack, New Jersey.
Now, previous studies in Europe and Israel reported some positive results on omega-3s. Right now, the participants in New Jersey are all healthcare workers at Hackensack University Medical Center. All right, demand for electric wheelchairs is skyrocketing, especially after a new federal law offering a big tax credit. But if you don't do your research, you could miss out on that tax break. Michael George explains.
Going green may save some green. Under a new federal law, buying a plug-in hybrid or fully electric vehicle could earn you a tax credit up to $7,500, but not so fast.
Those qualifications depend on the car, they depend on the buyer's income, they depend on where the car is made and where even some of the parts of the car were made.
Keith Berry with Consumer Reports says the tax break rules can be confusing.
So Keith, we've got 6 electric vehicles here. Which of these qualify for the tax credit?
Well, let's see. This one here, not made in North America, so it doesn't qualify. This one, it might in 2023. We're still waiting to find out. This one here, too expensive, doesn't qualify. This one, again, might in 2023. We don't know yet. This one's way too expensive. And that one down there, not made in North America. So right now, none of them qualify.
At the Consumer Reports test track in Colchester, Connecticut, we took a ride in Hyundai's all-electric Ioniq 5 with engineer Alex Nizick.
And it also drives really well. The handling is really good.
Yeah, I can feel it right now. It's really smooth on these turns.
That's right.
But this car also won't earn you a tax break. The federal government put out a list of vehicles that may qualify, including the 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee plug-in hybrid and the 2022 Ford Mustang Mach-E. But the rules could change before the credit takes effect next year. So if you're on the fence,
I'd postpone my buying decisions until I found out whether it actually did qualify or not.
Experts also say the tax break shouldn't be the only factor if you're in the market for an EV. Michael George, CBS News, Colchester, Connecticut.
Now, many states also offer tax credits and other incentives for eco-friendly vehicles. You can find that list at the website for the Department of Energy. All right, you've probably heard about art thefts, but what happens when someone steals historical items from the National Archives? We'll tell you coming up next on Mid-Morning. All right, welcome back. Over the past month, there's been a lot of talk about the National Archives and about the records and papers that are supposed to be in the archives' possession. A CBS News review has found a series of other cases in which people were prosecuted for stealing and sometimes selling America's archives artifacts. Scott McFarland takes us on the trail of stolen history.
Well, there's no doubt as to which one did the most.
Many of us keep old collectibles in the basement, but no one does it like David Golden.
Yeah, it goes up to 25,000.
In a climate-controlled vault in his Connecticut home, Golden has more than 100,000 historic audio recordings he's chased down or collected for decades.
Remarkably, not
including dispatches from World War II and an original recording of Orson Welles' 1938 War of the Worlds, and the lone copy of an obscure 1937 broadcast of Babe Ruth hunting birds. Some so valuable he's donated them to the National Archives near Washington. So you can imagine his shock years later when he spotted that Babe Ruth recording on eBay.
I said, holy expletive. That can't be.
An Archives employee lifted the recording and tried to sell it. The Justice Department found Leslie Woffen also stole a series of other artifacts. In 2018, historian Antonin DeHaze pleaded guilty to stealing from the archives, too, snatching historic pieces that included a fallen Tuskegee airman's dog tags during a visit to the archives. CBS News has learned of about a half dozen theft cases involving thousands of stolen documents in the past decade, but none as bold as Barry Landau's.
I think he just thought he could get away with it.
Landau stole presidential records from FDR's library in New York and artifacts from the Maryland Center for History and Culture in Baltimore, and pocketed the items after sewing extra pockets in his coat and trying to distract the staff with cupcakes and charm, till an eagle-eyed staffer spotted Landau's sticky fingers.
He's sitting at this table. Somebody spots him from above.
Yes.
Up there.
Yes.
Landau, DeHaze, and Woffen all pleaded guilty and served prison time. As for Dave Golden, his archives donations are returned, and the home library is still growing. The archives has tight security and cameras and internal inspectors who track down stolen items and check for those secondhand sales, because there are people who try to find a price for America's priceless treasures. Scott McFarland, CBS News, Washington.
When we come back, an unlikely friendship. Mid-morning will return in a moment. Welcome back. For the past 2 weeks, the world has watched the pageantry of the royal family as they honored Queen Elizabeth. The Queen may have lived in a palace, but she felt at home in the stables. That passion led to an unlikely friendship with a California cowboy. Mark Strausman has more.
And this is the Queen's hallway.
Improbably, indelibly, Monty Roberts became Queen Elizabeth's horseman and more.
Her Majesty has treated me as if I was a younger brother.
Roberts revolutionized horse training, taming horses using a silent language of kindness. In 1989, the Queen, with her lifelong love of horses, invited him to her stables at Windsor Castle.
I thought she was a groom. I said, nice to meet you. And I stepped back and I went, oh my God. Oh, you're the Queen. And yes, last time I checked.
Handwritten letters and annual Christmas greetings framed their 3-decade relationship.
Did you consider her a friend?
I would call her Her Majesty. But the friendship was deep.
Did you ever think to yourself, what am I doing hanging out with Her Majesty?
Only 2 or 3 times a day. And every night when I went to bed.
On Monday, Monty Roberts will go to the funeral of a friend, still in shock.
I said, no. What? And I don't want to let her go. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
A dark horse friendship, the California cowboy and the Queen. Mark Strausman, CBS News, Solvang, California.
All right, for a twist of history, King Charles would not have been in line to be the monarch. Vlad Gutierrez, who considers himself a royal history nerd, explains it to us.
As the world mourns the death of Queen Elizabeth II, it feels nearly impossible to imagine a change to the monarchy after her 70 years on the throne.
Queen Elizabeth II represented stability to Britain and to the world.
But at the time of her birth, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was never meant to be queen. Here's why. When King George V, Queen Elizabeth's grandfather, died in 1936, his firstborn son, King Edward VIII, ascended the throne. But a controversial romance with American divorcee Wallis Simpson put an abrupt end to a reign that lasted just 325 days.
Divorce was still something that was not done, and it certainly wasn't a common practice for monarchs.
So he was given a choice: give up the love of his life or give up the throne. The king chose to abdicate.
In his palace, the king was about to address the nation.
A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as king and emperor.
which thrust his brother, George VI, who was also Elizabeth's father, into the spotlight.
The nation believes that when I speak for them.
As featured in the movie The King's Speech, George VI was merely just the spare, a man with a stutter, a fear of public speaking, with no desire to be king.
I ask you to join with me in that act of thanksgiving.
But he forged ahead, fulfilling his duty and preparing his firstborn child, Elizabeth, to one day be queen. That included serving in the women's branch of the British Army during World War II. The 25-year-old heir was touring Kenya when she learned her father had died.
It is very clear that she understood that her life would be dedicated to service. She took it very, very seriously.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
It's a very complicated legacy even for a lot of Africans.
But Washington Post columnist Karen Attiah says the imperial family and its colonial subjugation of lands and people was not something to be celebrated.
Even under her reign, there was the Mau Mau Rebellion of Kenya, for instance, which was a colony under the British at that time, which the British violently crushed, put Kenyans into concentration camps, evidence of torture, of displacement, which to this day, the survivors and the descendants are seeking damages from the UK for that.
In her global travels, Queen Elizabeth never publicly acknowledged the monarchy's often brutal colonial past. And over the past few days, many people around the world have expressed resentment towards the woman who symbolized to them the systems of oppression and forced extraction of labor.
Why should we talk about it now?
The reason why we haven't been able to have proper conversations about Britain, about the royal family, about the symbols of white supremacy and colonialism is because those discussions have been whitewashed, erased, and sabotaged.
Despite the complicated history of the monarchy, there is no doubt that Queen Elizabeth II was a beloved monarch, evidenced by the people from all over the world who've made their way to England to pay their respects to the Queen, who always said she was merely a humble servant.
And there have been other royal twists of fate. When she was born, Elizabeth's great-great-grandmother, Victoria, was fifth in line of succession for the throne, behind the four eldest sons of King George III. The deaths of various princes and a lack of male heirs resulted in the princess capturing the crown, arguably changing the course of history. Vladimir Dutin, CBS News, New York.
Coming up next, a conversation with Marcus Mumford. His story is just ahead. Stay with us. All right, we're back. Marcus Mumford rose to fame with his Grammy-winning namesake band, Mumford & Sons. But now the singer-songwriter has a new solo album featuring his most personal music yet. It's called Self-Titled, and it's out this month. He talked to Anthony Mason about the cathartic album making process and then writing about his painful past with fierce honesty.
So you're starting kind of small here in Newport. Is that by design?
Yeah. I wanted to start amongst friends.
Marcus Mumford took his first steps as a solo artist this summer at the Newport Folk Festival.
And it feels pretty different.
I bet.
It's pretty different. It's a bit less of a circus.
All by yourself?
Yeah.
Well done for signing up to a gig. You have literally no idea what's going to happen.
Have you ever toured solo before?
No.
No.
No, tonight's my first solo show.
Wow.
I can still taste you, and I hate it.
His opening number that night
Wasn't a choice in the mind of a child, and you knew it.
Was about a childhood trauma.
You took the first slice of me, and you ate it raw.
At what point did you decide to write about it?
It didn't really feel like a choice. It just kind of happened.
Like a cannibal.
Cannibal describes an incident he'd repressed for most of his life.
Because I'd not told anyone for 25 years that I was sexually abused as a child.
Mm-hmm. And the cost of that was what, do you think?
A sort of pattern of secrecy and shame and keeping things hidden.
Yeah.
That has been like unbelievably freeing for me to be able to take ownership of that, you know. It wasn't family, it wasn't church, which would be the two places people might assume.
So, how old were you when this happened?
I was 6 years old.
6. Did anybody know about it at that time?
No.
At some point, Mumford says, he'd persuaded himself that he'd told his parents. But then his mother asked to hear his new song.
Play a Cannibal. A couple of days later, she sits me down and says, "Can I ask what that song is about?" I was like, "Of course you can, yeah." It's about that childhood sexual abuse thing. She was like, "What are you talking about?"
How did she react?
It's hard, it's really hard for her. And I asked her permission to tell you this story.
His song, Grace, is about that moment with his mom. Now 5, Mumford is noticeably thinner.
Is that part of this whole process?
Yeah, completely part of it for me.
A process of facing demons he'd been dancing with for a long time.
You ask me why I'd want to break the very thing I love the most. You knew I couldn't answer plainly.
He sings about them on Prior Warning.
On the ground like you were drawing in the sand, and I surrender now.
What's that about exactly?
That's sort of my rock bottom song. And looking to understand a bunch of behaviors of mine that felt kind of Jekyll and Hyde. And trying to trace those to the source.
In writing Cannibal, he's finally identified the source. It was the last song he mixed in the studio with producer Blake Mills.
And I just broke down, leaning on the console in Sound City, probably doing a lot of damage. Making the console wet, and just like all came out. Blake came up behind me, around the back of the desk. And he puts his hands on my shoulders and leans his forehead into my back. In that moment, mixing Cannibal and having a good old cry, it felt not just like catharsis and relief, but it really felt like fulfillment.
Mumford will tour the U.S. this fall, but he insists he's not leaving his namesake band. Mumford & Sons has charted 3 #1 albums in the U.S., but founding member Winston Marshall quit the quartet last year after taking criticism for praising a book by a right-wing author.
How hard was it for you to say goodbye to Winston and the band?
Well, I haven't said goodbye to Winston because he's my friend, and I didn't really want him to leave the band. I asked him not to. But I also have to support his choice too, because he's my friend and remains my friend.
Now Mumford says he sees an opportunity.
So, you know, Ted, Ben, and I are pretty aligned on the creative vision for the next bit, and that's why I'm excited about it. I wouldn't stay in it if we weren't.
The singer passed the first part of the pandemic by writing music for a TV show, Ted Lasso.
In many ways, if you're known as a solo artist at all, that's how you're known.
Yeah, right, I guess so. Yeah!
His self-titled solo debut takes that a step further.
Even though this record's billed as a solo record, it's the most collaborative record I've ever made.
Is that right?
Yeah, the list of characters on it is extensive.
Of course I deny it, can hardly believe it, dismiss or demean it, cause I know I can't speak it.
Even with the video for Cannibal.
You did it in a high school?
Yeah, in the high school gym.
His record label needed it in a hurry, so he asked a friend to direct.
So now you have the only music video ever shot by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and he did it on his phone. In one take. I mean, it's hilarious.
Fellow artists like Brandi Carlile and Phoebe Bridgers also added their support on the album.
Every time I kind of hit a brick wall creatively, a woman would come along and lift me over it. And it started with Brandi, and then Phoebe, and then behind the scenes, my wife.
Ultimately, Mumford says his album is about freedom.
It's a dangerous game.
And forgiveness.
Play with fire.
you know, I talk on the record about having compassion for abusers, because, you know, normally something's happened in their past that's led them to that place.
Have you reached the point of forgiveness?
I don't think that I believe forgiveness is a point.
Yeah.
I think it's a process.
Yeah.
A lot of it is to do with kind of self-forgiveness.
Where do you feel like you are in that process?
Like I've made a good start.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to wrap things up. All right, the Viking Mississippi, a state-of-the-art vessel built to host almost 400 guests, arrived at Riverside Park in Wisconsin last week. It is one of Viking River Cruise's largest ships and was built specifically for the Mississippi River, the first Viking vessel in the region. It is also energy efficient. Its 15-day river cruise to New Orleans will run you around $13,000. And that is all we have for you today. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.